Yo, what is up? Welcome back to another live stream here on Free Will Photos. Sorry, I had a typo in last week's message saying that I was going to start at 6. That's actually next Saturday, and then today I just did not wake up on time, so I apologize. But here we are, and thank you for tuning in. Like always, if you have questions throughout the stream, just drop the comments in there. I do check the comments regularly throughout the stream, and I am super excited to just kind of go over some tips and tricks that I use in my regular workflow. And hopefully, this will be something that we find helpful for the community at large. And, we're just going to have some fun with it. All right. So, what are we going to be doing today? Well, we're going to go over some images, and we're using a set of images that I took my dog out earlier this week, and he had took my dog out to use the restroom, and I looked outside, and there was this beautiful sunrise. So, what we're going to do is I'm going to talk through this sunrise, and we're going to edit this in a few different ways. So let's just go ahead and dive right into that. So boom, here we are inside of the computer, and I just got to move a little thing out of the way. All right, so here we are inside of the computer, and you can see that there are some sunrise photos here. And the first set here, these are bracketed images, all right? So we're gonna make an HDR out of those three, or I think this is also a bracketed set. Let me check. This one was taken at 61921, 61921, and yeah. So those are all bracketed sets, and these are as well. Now, the way I can tell if I took these as bracketed sets is really just looking at the time, right? Because you can look at the seconds there, and if it all is within the same second, then it's probably a bracketed set, because everything, whenever I take photos, I typically have some time in between. So there's a tip for you right there. If you're just trying to figure out, did I bracket some photos properly, or did I bracket photos? Then, there you have it. There's a way for you to check that. But let's just go ahead and dive into editing these photos. Now, this one I took, and I wanted this to be pretty dark. The first image is going to be what is known as like the base exposure. And then the second image is one stop darker. And the second image is one stop overexposed from here. That's how I prefer to do my brackets, 3 images. So we're just gonna select them, right click, and go into merge or create HDR. All right. Now you're greeted with a few options here, and one of them is natural, auto, surreal, or there's 4 options: natural, auto, natural auto. Wow, can't talk today. Surreal, and then surreal auto. Now, I play around with these, so I'm just going to click on natural. And I think this is going to give one of the more, for lack of better words, a natural tonality to the image. Now, this little box, you can try and resize this to make it a little bit larger, because that little micro version, you can't really make any good decisions of your editing here. All right, so if you've never used the HDR feature inside of ON1, let's go ahead and just go over this real basic. So the first one you have is your tone and color. That's where I'm at right now. All right, this is no different than your develop module. You get to change your camera profiles here. And because I'm using the ON1, the R6, ON1 does not have the R6 camera profiles. So if you want to use those, you'll have to use the Canon software to export those images and change the profile. But you have some options here, right? You got ON1 standard, which I seem to use a lot. Then you have landscape. This is going to make things a lot more dark and contrasty. This one, ON1 portrait, makes things a lot more bright. This could be helpful if you're going for something where you want even exposure across the image. Now, that sounds like a common sense thing, like, yes, please, even exposure across my image. I want that. But not all the time would you want that, right? Then there's ON1 Vivid, which this is like a mixture of landscape and portrait together. That's the best way of putting it, with the exception that it does make your colors pop a little bit more, right? And then we have ON1 Neutral, and this one is probably my second favorite to use, especially when it comes to HDR photos, because this is like a raw canvas. It just exposes things as best as it can, and then it lets you figure out what you want to do next. All right. Then there's linear raw. Now, linear raw, I'm still experimenting with. I get good edits and I get bad edits with this. It just depends on what I'm editing. But for this one, I think I'm either going to go with neutral or maybe even portrait. That's not portrait. There's portrait. And I think portrait looks good. I like how deep things are. The shadows, they look deep and rich, but they still seem to retain enough information that you can really understand what's going on here. So I'll go with ON1 portrait. That is the first tip, actually. When you're creating an HDR image, mess around with your camera profiles. Make sure that you are experimenting to see what it is that these profiles are going to do to your image. All right. And that's before you even come down here. I would wait to edit these before you come down here. All right. This is the exact process that I use. So I don't want to expose my image just yet. I just want to see what profile I want to start using. Now, once I have my profile selected, we'll come down here to the lower left-hand side of the HDR module and take a look at some of the options we have available. Now, the first one here, this is the 00 or the base exposure, right? This is what, if I were to take one image, this is what would have come up. And then I have my -1 and my +1 exposure based off of this one. Now, the photo that is selected is the photo that all of the ghosting, when you go to the ghosting, and right now, I don't think I have ghosting on. Yeah. So I don't have it on, and I don't think there's much of anything that's moving. If you're not familiar, there's some ghosting here in the lamp. You can see how it's red there. I guess I shook the camera. I was hand holding it. Now, this is really good to identify. I'm not worried about these lamps because I'm going to do something with the edit on the lamps anyway. But de-ghosting, what that means is if something in your photo was moving, a wave, a bird, a tree, a person, whatever, hopefully the person was able to stand still long enough for you to get a good shot. But if you turn off the ghosting, or the de-ghosting, I should say, you'll see like these weird little like movements, and this photo probably isn't the best for that. But you can see that this lamppost back here, I don't know how the YouTube compression is going to show it, but this lamppost back here looks a little odd versus this light right here. And, you know, truthfully, it's not that big of a deal. All right. Now, if you were to turn this all the way up, and, you know, you really only need to turn this all the way up, like these trees are now captured in the ghosting. This red outline is because of that little bubble, right? It's showing me where all of the ghosting would have happened. So you can see it's in the areas where things would have moved. All right. With the exception of this probably moved because of the capturing of the light. Light, if you don't know this, light moves. It's an energy. Energy moves around. We can't see it, but lights do move. All right. And then we'll turn on very high, and you'll just see that it's the same thing, more red. But this photo is about the sky, so I'm not really worried about the ghosting. I'm just going to leave it on medium. It'll make it easier for the processing, and it's probably the most appropriate. Then you get to mess around with your default looks. Again, you have 4 of them: natural, natural auto, surreal, and surreal auto. All right. So if you wanted to, you can come in here and you can click on these. It's going to start making some adjustments for you, right? This is the natural auto, where it's making those adjustments for me, with the exception of my ON1 standard camera profile. You may want to change your camera profile after you mess around with some of these. You may not. So I do recommend that you just play around with these, right? Not a tip. Now, the surreal really makes this sunset pop, and I enjoy that. What I think we're going to end up doing is, one of my other tips and tricks is, we're going to mask out the foreground and edit the back, or the sunrise, not sunset. We're going to edit the sunrise separate from the rest of the image, because I want more control over what I do here. So that'll be coming up pretty soon. And then there's Surreal Auto. And this, to me, does not look good. It's a very flat image. And, you know, this is where HDR gets a bad name. If you leave it on natural, like, that does not look bad. Even natural auto, you look at this and you're like, oh, well, that's actually pretty good, right? And again, I think it actually did change my profile. Let's see. This is neutral, and this looks good. Like, there's so many different ways, but we got to keep moving, because I could sit here all day. And this is exactly what I do with my photo editing. So you're literally looking over my shoulder or at my screen as I make decisions for my photo editing. And then you want to check align, because you want your photos to get aligned. If they're aligned is turned off, you're going to have some weird, you see how that looks blurry now? You definitely want to have your photos aligned. All right. So make sure you mark the align button. And then you get one last thing down here is, you get to choose which of these images do you want to have in the photo. So if you took like an 11 shot bracket, which, you know, some people do. Now that I'm looking at this, I don't like the portrait. Let's go back to standard. And because I'm also on natural auto, I want to be on natural. There we go. I like that much better. All right. But say you had an 11 shot bracket and you realize, like, oh man, I only needed like 5 shots. Well, you just check these little tick marks, and now maybe I don't need that overexposed image. It's not included. You see here where it says 2 of 3 photos. This is the image without the overexposed. And here's the image with the overexposed. You could see that it opened up some of the shadow detail here. All right. That's all that it did. I would recommend leaving the develop piece alone until you get into ON1 Photo Raw. All right. Now you get to choose where you want to open your image. You can click on the drop down here, and you can either open it in develop, effects, or return to browse. Now, I typically always open mine in effects. Now, some days I'll sit here and I will tweak this, the exposure. to get exactly what I want out of the image, right? Because since I have 3 exposures to play with, when I pull up on the shadows, I'm going to get a lot more information recovered out of the shadows than I would normally with a typical shadow recovery. And then if I pull down on the highlights, I would get the exact same thing. So you could sit here, or not the exact same thing, but I have more control. And then I can make my midtones a little bit more bright, and or I can make them darker, right? You just have so much to play around with here because you have so many, or you have 3 exposures. So, and this is the benefit of shooting bracketed or HDR images, right? When I pull down on the blacks, I'm really darkening some things. And then also, the cool thing about HDR is in the exposure. You can bring your exposure up, and you're going to be able to retain a lot more information than you would in a typical image because you have so much information, right? And then if you want to bring it down, same concept, but I typically don't mess with my exposure, and I leave the exposure and contrast alone, especially at this point in the edit. All right. Now, what you can do is also mess with the vibrance. This is really just so I get an idea of what I want to do with this. And the sunrise, that is way too much vibrance, right? So I would probably pull down on that just to see, what I can do in the vibrance section as I get ready to go and edit that sky. But truthfully, I would probably pull up on it very little here because that's a global edit, and I do want some of that color to, kind of marry across the image. All right. So now that that's done, the next thing that you can do, and I typically don't do this, but you can click on the HDR look. Now again, you come back, you have some different styles, right? I can add kind of a glowing look, and that works really well on landscape images, especially at sunrise or sunset. And then you have this exaggerated edges in tones. Not my style. All right, that's just not my style. But what you can do is mess around with the compression, and this is just if I were to pull this back, this is not affecting the image at all. All right, and if I pull this all the way up, it really crunches up the image and adds like micro contrast, and it does some really odd stuff. I'll be honest, I don't know everything that it does, but you can mess around with the compression and see what it does to the image, right? You don't always have to know what a slider does just to pull around on it and see how it works. Don't feel like you have to know how every single thing in a software works. Trial and error, all right? But then, if you wanted to add some glow, I can add a little bit of glow. I would typically do this in a separate filter though. So I am going to, and then detail, I think you can all imagine what detail does. There's no detail in the image, and there's a ton of it. And then this is you do want to add some detail to your HDR images. All right, it's going to help with the sharpness and the perceived sharpness. Then we'll pull up on clarity a little bit. Let's see what happens with clarity. Yeah, I think that works. All right, now let's get into the fun stuff. You can hit save. It's going to open up and develop, but I want to go straight into effects because I think it's developed the way that I want it to be for me to go and make an edit. So I'm going to grab some coffee. And then we will jump into editing the photo. Now, I may have to turn the camera off of me, depending on how this decides to go. Now, okay, I was about to say, for some reason, it didn't open and edit. here we go. Now we are in edit. So, well, it's not loaded yet. That's what's going on here. And if you look at the title of this particular image, it says moon and sunrise. And the moon was actually behind me. And I turned around and I took some photos of that. So I'll show that to you here in a little bit. But man, this is going fairly slow. But now would be a good time to drop any questions that you have in reference to ON1 Photo Raw photo editing and things of that sort. And we're starting off with HDR images, and we'll move into just like single edit images. Now, yes, you can make an HDR photo out of JPEGs. So if you are photographing and you want to make a HDR series out of JPEG images, you absolutely can do that. You do not have to photograph them all raw if that's not something you're comfortable with doing. All right. Now, when I make HDR images, I don't make what's the word? I don't use presets, but this needs to be straightened, and I don't want this to be a square. I want this to be at the original, and we'll just, I'm trying to, there we go. Let's straighten this out a little bit. I'm using a light pole as my guide, assuming that that is straight. Here, I'll just, come on. You can do it, computer. Of course. Sorry. Now we can come down, straight down the light pole. A lot of people out walking today. All right, and then we'll apply that. That's a little bit more straight. Okay, now we have a much more pleasing image, potentially. I don't know. Now I feel like this is not straight. I don't like that. I'm changing it. So one of the things when it comes to really any image, but landscape in general, you want to make sure that you have something that's straight because it helps with the perception. And I like this a lot more, so we're going to leave that. Okay, so here's the cool thing. You now have options again to edit your HDR when you're in effects. But I'm not worried about editing that right now. Instead, what I want to do is go ahead and edit the foreground. So we're going to hit add a filter. We're going to do tone enhancer. And I want to keep my HDR look underneath all of this because I want to edit on top of the HDR look. That's something you want to be familiar with. All right. You always want to edit on top of whatever your HDR look is, or your base exposure, so to speak. All right. So I'm only looking in the foreground when I make these edits. Gonna open up some shadows. We'll bring down the black just a tad bit, and maybe even contrast it just a little. And let's mess around with the exposure. Yeah, that should probably look good. And we'll go with clarity. All right, there's my foreground. Now, obviously, got to mask this out. I'm gonna go with my AI mask, and the area that I don't want is all of this up here. And we'll use the refining tools to get in between those tree branches and make this as good as we can. of a mask. All right, so there's that. Shift X. Now let's just go ahead and paint in all of the areas that we would like to keep. It looks like I'm trying to keep that sky, but I'm not. Make the brush size much larger here. And just paint all of this in. And then I'll make it a little bit smaller and come grab some of this stuff up here. Get this light. And let's hit apply, see what happens. Hopefully it makes, and it does make a pretty good selection. So I'm actually pleased with that. We'll hit done and we will go on to the next step here. So as you can see, it's only making those adjustments to the foreground and we have a pretty decent mask, but we need to refine this, and I want to use this one where it's the refine brush along the edge of the mask to clean up tough stuff like trees and stuff like that. So what I'm going to do is paint over here, and this works better when you do it in smaller sections. All right, the algorithm, it just works better when you do this in small little pieces like so. Otherwise, you know, depending on how fast your computer is and how much information you give it, ON1 will just time out on you or not do what you expect it to do. And that's frustrating. That is frustrating. And I'm going to check the mask here in a little bit. You'll see. Actually, we'll just check it now. Let's hit O. So you can see it's making a better selection in between the branches, and it doesn't have to be absolutely perfect. I'm going to come over this, and it should get a little bit more refined there. Come over this in. And I know that there's a lot of open space here, so I am going to come down and really get these edges in here. Let me turn this off for a second, make sure that, yep, there's the house that was over there. So hitting O on the keyboard and going back and forth looking at your image as well as your mask is always a good option. So make sure that you are doing that. All right, now because this is a live stream and I don't want to keep you guys, you know, watching me make selections, I am going to leave this like so. I say that as I'm still editing. Yeah, there we go. That's much better because I don't want that in the mask. Yeah, because that's part of the sky and that would have looked weird. But all right. So now that we have this mask, one thing that I really enjoy about ON1 is the ability to just copy and paste a mask. So I'm going to copy this mask and then we're going to go and start messing with our color for the sky. Once ON1 finishes copying the mask, apparently. Hey, does your ON1 move slow? Let me know in the comment section below. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on color enhancer, and that's because I may want to adjust the white balance of the sky to make it more warm. But typically I would just click on color adjustment. But because I think I'm going to want to change the tone in the sky, we'll see. But all I did was copy the mask there, and then I hit invert on the selection. So if I hit O, you can see that I have the sky selected and mostly none of this tree and all that good stuff. So, and we're going to see how this plays out here in a second because it did look a little funky. But let's go ahead and close the mask down. Or actually, no. Before you close the mask, I recommend that whenever you do something like a sky adjustment, because the sky does impact the look of the entire image, I recommend that you pull your feather out just a little bit, right? And what that does is it just helps blend in with the surrounding areas. And we want that, all right? So now I'm going to close down my mask and we are going to skip over the saturation and vibrance section, because as you can see, if I just pull up on the vibrance, man, that works great. But I may not want to do that right away. The way that I personally like to work on my skies, and let me get my face off of there. Let's just go with the screen only. There we go. That way you can really see the controls that I'm adjusting here. We got some colors here, right? We got some oranges, some yellows. So let's start with red. And I'm just going to pull on my brightness to the left to see, yeah. So, because I want this to be a darker, more rich, like sunrise. Super exaggerating. And, you know, that's the beauty of photo editing. You can really make some cool things. So we'll pull this up, and I think that's pretty good. Let's see. We can mess around with the hue. I don't want to make it look too unrealistic, but I do want this to look really rich. All right. And maybe we'll mess around with the range here. Again, trial and error. And you will see that I go back and forth. So now let's go with the oranges. And I think this is where the photo is really going to pop. Yeah, so maybe we want to make those brighter. Okay, I like that. Getting them a little bit brighter here. Let's go ahead and saturate that a tad. Okay, now it's starting to look like a painting, and I don't know if I want that. So we'll just saturate it a little bit, and let's bring the hue more towards red. Nah, I don't like that. Let's make it a little bit more in this direction. Yeah, okay, I can work with that. Now let's pull the range up and see how much of the yellow or the orange range I want to affect. And now let's go into the yellows. I know for a fact that I want to make these yellows just a little bit more orange, and we'll saturate them. All right, and maybe make them darker. This is such a very, very fine adjustment. I don't even know if it's going to come through on YouTube. Now, the next spot is this blue sky area. So let's go ahead and click on our blues. And the way that I like to mess with my sky is I love to darken the sky, saturate it, and really push it towards one of these ends, whichever one looks the best. And maybe there would be good. And then we'll push this more towards blue, saturate, darken. All right, now let's turn this off and on, see how it looks. So this is without the sky adjustment. This is with the sky adjustment. You can see it's starting to pull some stuff together quite nicely, and we're not done yet. So now let's go ahead and hit the vibrance here. Vibrance, we'll pull that up. Yeah, we'll pull the vibrance up. And maybe mess around with the overall saturation. And this is just saturating the entire sky. Yeah, maybe we'll do something like that. Now, what I'm noticing is right here, let's zoom in. Right here, we need to refine the mask, all right? So I'm going to click on the mask icon, come over here to refine, and we will actually paint this one in. So we'll just hover over that. And I want to paint this in this time because this is adding to the selection, right? And let's hit O just to see what happened. And it looks like it's getting there. But let's just go back to the masking tool, Shift X. We're gonna make this smaller and put the feather all the way up. I think that'll work. And we are on paint in. So I should just see this all turn white. And I'm just going to manually paint this area in because I want this area to be affected. And then we'll come over here to the refinement tools, Shift X, make this a little bit smaller and come across these edges. And hopefully that will help, well, paint it back in some of the sky. And I don't want that. Thought I had Shift X. All right, plus. And I won't make it perfect for the live stream, but you get the point. You definitely want to check your mask, make sure, because you want to get the most natural looking photo that you possibly can get. Go ahead and hit Command 0. That brings us all the way out to the edit, or brings the image, you know, just full screen or whatever, back to the normal viewing size. All right. So far, this is looking okay. I'm not gonna lie, but I need to do something more with this sky, and I think it needs to be a little bit better exposed. So I'm gonna add in another tone enhancer. This time, again, actually, I need to go here. We're going to copy this mask because that's the one that we use to edit the sky, right? I'm going to copy that mask. And you could do this a few different ways. I could go to the local tab as well. And in fact, I think that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go to the local tab. Instead of using the tone enhancer over here, we'll go to the local tab, paste in this particular edit. And you can see, oh yeah, now it's really obvious that we're missing some areas in that sky. So let's refine that. And I think we want to paint this in. And maybe a larger brush for these might work. Let's try it and get some coffee. It is working better. It is working. I just want to make sure that this looks good. And you can tell that it is not a darker orange or yellow as everything else is. But this is, you know, one of the challenges with ON1. It works well for what you can do with it, but some of these things you may want to take into another application, and no, this is one of those limitations, but I think that's better. I can work with that. All right, so I don't want to underexpose it that much. I just want it to be darker, and I want it to be less structured, right? I want it to look a little faded or blurry, so to speak. I wonder what happens with if I were to adjust the midtones. No, I'm not feeling that either. And I'm also going to feather this even more, because this adjustment is going to be very obvious if you don't. And I'll leave it like that. I think that that's good. So exposure settings, always check your before and after. It helped a little bit. Maybe it can be underexposed just a little bit more, and maybe even saturated. Let's try some contrast. Okay, I'm liking this a little bit more. So now we have the foreground to work on. We'll go back to effects, and I'll get rid of that one. So keeping yourself tidy is another one of the tips. And this is the sky adjustment, sky color adjustment. And this is the foreground adjustment. Okay. And then this is just the base HDR look. So you don't have to worry about that, renaming that if you don't feel like you need to. However, I think that we can get some more greenery out of this grass. So let's go ahead and give that a shot. We'll come here. And we will copy, which mask am I on? I'm on, we could use this one. See if it's going to take some time to copy. Yep. All right, now that it's copied, we'll go ahead and hit add filter, and we will click on color adjustment this time, because I don't think I'm going to want to mess around with the temperature. And that's what I didn't do with the sky, but that's fine. And then we'll come here and we will paste the mask and invert the mask, because we want to affect this area down here. We want to go, let's click on foliage and see what happens. So foliage, and I think this grass is more yellow than anything else. Yeah, and it's more yellow than anything else. But maybe we're not going to be able to get as much green out of this as I had hoped. But that's fine. That's fine. Not gonna worry about that, because that does not look good at all. The grass is more green than what the photo makes it look like it is. Maybe if I just crank up the green. And it's because it's so early in the morning that, and the sun, the way that the sun was casting over it, it didn't look as green. So I was hoping to revive this a little bit. But oh well, we'll just rock with it. All right, we're just gonna roll with it. No big deal, because it is a lot better now than it was. And I think so. We'll just call this grass adjustment. So what is the next thing that? So now it's time to really start to, I think, paint with light, doing a little bit of dodging and burning. So let's go ahead and we'll hit add. What do I want to use? You know what? We'll use curves. We'll use a curves adjustment to kind of get our dodge and burn going on here. All right. And the way that this is just my method. you can absolutely come up with your own. The way that I like to do this is pull up on the highlights section of the curves tone, and this is going to be my dodge method. All right, and I'm going to label this dodge. And then what I like to do, this is just me, is come into, or I guess you don't have to click on the mask, you can just come to the setting icon. And because I pulled up on the highlights, I am going to only apply this to my highlights. And then I turn this off and on. Now that's only affecting the sky. So I guess I don't have any highlights to dodge, you know, in the foreground, which is what I'm really looking at, because I think the sky is where I want it to be, which then tells me that I can, and I'll just pull this over to here, take this off of highlights, and let's go with shadows. And I don't want to make this photo too dark, right? So now I may not be doing dodging anymore. Sometimes you don't need to dodge. Sometimes you just need to burn. It's giving me more of a matte look, and that's cool. But I want to make those shadows just a little bit more rich. And I'll probably just go somewhere like this. And I think this could work. So now what I do is come to the mask, hit invert, and I get a pretty large sized brush. All right, I'm only going to be working in the shadows. Yep, that's what I applied. So it's only going to be working in the backside here, which not a problem, right? I want to bring my flow down, and I want to bring my opacity down. All right, I don't want to paint in that full effect because that just doesn't look good. What I want to do is kind of bring in just a little bit of contrast in the image. All right, you'll definitely, and I am adding in this contrast, mostly going to be on the roads here. That's where I think it makes the most sense to be. And this is one of the methods that I use for dodging and burning. This is not the only one that I use, but, and let's see what happened. So really subtle, you can see it, but you wouldn't know that it was actually there unless you watched me do it, right? And that's the point. Now, and that's a burn. Now I need to do a dodge, but this is going to be, and I should have labeled that shadow burn, but whatever. This one, I'm going to increase the highlight of this grass, right? Or not the highlight, the brightness of the grass. So, and maybe even, I'm only looking at the grass here, by the way. I'm not looking at the sky. Maybe, because it is in the shadow. Yeah, I think that'll work. So again, just gonna invert this and large brush, low opacity, and I'm just gonna paint over this. Come over into this corner, get that. And I will paint over the grass just a little bit more because I don't want the focus to be on the grass, right? And I think that that might be a little too much. So I'm just gonna pull down on the opacity here. And I'm gonna start hitting up this grass section there. maybe even hit up this grass section. And this is something you can take hours to do. All right. I can even say, you know what? I really do like the way that this looks over here so far. Maybe I want to brighten up these trees, right? And I'll use a stronger opacity on the trees. Right? So now I'm bringing in a little bit more attention to those trees. And maybe I want to really highlight this little section of the road. So I'll do that. And I know that I dodged or burned on the road earlier. So this is kind of counterintuitive or productive. But maybe I want to illustrate that this lamp is really shining down in this area. And all I'm doing is making my brush a little bit smaller each time as I paint it over that, because it's going to build, right? And these are all just very, very subtle things. You do not have to do this. This is just a way that I enjoy spending time editing photos. Sometimes it comes out great. Other times, not so great. So, take that for what it's worth. You may be able to get this and be like, oh man, this is just fantastic. And other times it won't work out. And we'll label this Dodge. So there you have it. Now, the last thing that I said I was going to do is inside of the sky adjustment. And this is where, I can say I want to warm up the sky. And that doesn't really seem to be doing much for me. Or cool it down. And that seems to work out pretty good. So, what would I do next? Well, one of my favorite things to do, or not favorite, I won't oversell it to you guys. It sounds a little gimmicky. One of the things that I like to do is play around with LUTs. Now, I never use a LUT at full strength unless it's a black and white LUT, and even still, I might change that. But what I want to do is hit color grading and just mess around with some of these presets in here. Like that looks really nice. I really enjoy the way that looks, especially with the dodging and the burning. Some of these LUTs, they really do bring out your edits. And I'm just going to filter through here and see if there's one that I like the way that this looks. This actually captures the essence of the morning. So I'm going to go with that. Now, because I know I'm not leaving it at full effect, what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw up the saturation and really make this super over the top just for now. And what I'm going to do next, that was the wrong button. There we go. So with the update to ON1, if you click inside of the item, as soon as when you click on one of the levers or sliders, I should say, if it turns white, you can move your mouse away and you can use your keyboard and use your up and down arrow keys. All right. And what I'm going to do is just pull this all the way down. So this is the way that the image looks with absolutely no LUT in it. And now I want to just start hitting up on the arrow key until I get to where I think it looks good. And I think we're getting close. Again, I want this to be fairly subtle. Just being honest, I want this to be fairly subtle. Maybe about there. Let's go ahead and turn this off and on. Yeah. So it just brings in that purple tone to the overall image and really helps it. So let's go ahead and look at it. This is the before, super crazy, and I wish there was a way. In fact, there is a way. So what I'm going to do is just duplicate this entire layer. This is a good way of looking at your befores and after. All right, before and afters. I don't know, your edits. And I am going to turn off every adjustment except for the HDR look. All right, because this is the image as it came in, HDR look, and then this is the final edit. Now, if you really want to see this, kind of side by side, what you can do is, and this could be considered a tip, you can click on the mask here, get your masking bug, and you can just click one time from black to white. And I guess I should turn on this one so you can actually see that it is going to fade between the two. We'll do it like that. And well, because this is, now what just happened? Go back, there we go. It's not doing a very good fade because, here, let's do this. I'm gonna make it obvious that we made an edit so that way you can see what I'm talking about, because we'll turn this LUT off. We'll add a new LUT because I don't want to mess up my edit. All right. And we will go into travel LUTs and let's just find something. There we go. And you can see it's only affecting the top of the image. The reason for that is because only the top of the image is masked in, right? So if you understand how masks work, and I'm not trying to insult anyone's intelligence here. Turn this to the side. All right. So the image on the right, I want this to be here. Let's go left and right. Bam. Why does that not look straight? Whatever. We're going to pretend that it's straight. Doesn't look straight to me, but it could be, and I just don't know what I'm looking at. So now, on the left side of the image, that is the edit underneath, because the mask here is black on this side, right? So whatever is not being shown, or white is the layer that you are editing currently. I am currently editing this top layer. So the edits that would be on here, which is just the HDR look, that's going to be wherever the white shows. I'm revealing that, but I am masking out everything else. So this is kind of, not a backwards way of masking, but this is just a way of seeing the before and after of an edit with an HDR look. All right. Hopefully ON1 develops a way of giving you snapshots, so that way you can just go back and forth in a history stack of a snapshot, which you have your history here. And yes, you can click on all of these things, but that can get very cumbersome. All right. And I guess they do have a way of doing snapshots now that I think about it. You can make a stamped layer and then turn off and on those layers. So I guess it's worthwhile to show you that as well. But that's essentially what I just did with this. So you would probably have to start with making this layer at the beginning, the HDR look, and saving that as a copy. But that then turns into a larger file and makes it very cumbersome. So I don't recommend that. Now that I think about it, I don't recommend that. All right, very good. Let's go ahead and let's delete this because I don't need that layer. And then it's going to bring me back to our crazy wonky layer here in a second. There it is. And the reason why it looks like this is because of this LUT. But when I take that LUT off and I turn this one back on, you'll see we get back to our original edit. There it is. All right. So let's hit done on that one. And let's go to one more image. And this one, I think I'm just going to edit. I feel like I wanted this to be black and white. When I seen it, I was inspired and I was like, you know, this might look really good in black and white. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to make this a black and white edit. And I think I'm going to use a LUT to make it black and white. So as you can see, we have a tree, which the tree isn't anything fantastic. This is over my neighbor's house. We're going to click on edit. This is not an HDR image. This was a single shot image and the sun was still rising, obviously. But I seen this and I was like, you know, I think that this will look good in black and white. And instead of turning my camera profile black and white, I just said, you know what, I'll do it in post. And the reason why I think this looks good in black and white is because of the sky. You can see how the gradient kind of comes down from this dark with this really contrasty item, which is the moon, which looks very small and you would not really know that it's the moon. So we'll have to deal with that. But then it comes down in this really nice gradient, right? So what I would have to work on is making this tree kind of not stand out, but look appropriate in the image. And that's what we're going to do. So the tree here is full of shadows. And in the develop module, all I'm going to do is really just mess around and see how much. It looks like I got to move this up 33 just to get the tree where I want it to be. And that's good news, or that's good information to know, because the next move that I'm going to make, and I guess I'll mess around and, you know, I might even be able to use portrait here. Let me crop this because I don't really care to see my neighbor's truck in the image. Let's go original ratio and let's crop this in. And, you know, we can probably even just go like this, right? How much of the tree do we need in the image? I think that might be a good, yeah. Just like some really chill out, old timey, not fine art because I don't want to oversell anything. All right. All right. So now what we want to do is really get this to work. I'm going to use a LUT. Like I said, there are black and white LUTs, and I believe these all come with ON1. Now, I typically would not use a LUT, but I want to make this a simple edit, right? I wasn't looking at this as like, oh man, I got to make this really complicated edit. I was just looking at it like, okay, how can I make a simple edit? And, you know, maybe I won't use a black and white LUT because this looks kind of cool. I actually like that. I do like that. And maybe if I desaturate it, but now it just doesn't look as cool. This looks way better. All right, so I'm going to leave that because I do like that light. But we'll do a black and white filter because, you know, that just didn't work out. And I'm gonna try and do an auto tone and see if that fixes it. So it brought out, it just didn't work. That didn't work. All right. So I guess I am going to have to do this the way that I would normally do it. All right. So base layer, black and white. And what we're going to do is hit add filter. And we're going to add a tone enhancer. I'm going to get this tree looking the way that I want it to look. I'm going to open up the shadows. I think we said it was about 33. Let's see if that, yeah, that looks about right. And then we will go ahead and bring down our blacks just a little bit because I want this to pop against the sky there. And then let's throw in some clarity and maybe a little bit of detail. Yeah, now that tree really does look like it has a purpose here in this photo. Maybe even pull up on the contrast of that. All right, so now we're gonna click on the mask and do a quick AI, or you know what? Let's try this. I've never tried this before. And I'm all about trying new things. Are you guys about trying new things when it comes to photo editing and stuff like that? All right, let's go ahead and go like so, because I don't think I need the entire tree. And now what I'll do is I will copy this mask. Hopefully this mask doesn't take as long to copy. No, it doesn't look like it did. And we'll go and make another tone enhancer. And we will paste the mask, invert it, and then let's just bring down the exposure. This is going to hopefully, you know, draw a little bit of that attention away from the tree, or I'm sorry, away from the sky into the tree, but given a nice little background interest. We'll click on the mask, go to our masking bug, and, or actually, I'm just gonna paint away where this is, or I guess it'll be paint in because I inverted the mask, because I don't want the moon to not have its own little brightness. And I did leave it on a low opacity from earlier, as well as a low flow, because, and did that even do anything? Yeah, it did a little. Maybe I can do a little bit more, because you could really see that glow. And maybe I should bring the glow down behind the tree. So let's go to the masking bug, and we'll make this a little bit smaller. And we'll make this a little bit smaller. Yeah, I think that could work. And we'll come, and I need to tidy up. So sky, adjustment, minimize, and then this is for the tree. And what we want to do is probably feather that a little bit more. And click on the mask. So far it doesn't want to cooperate with me. There we go. And we'll pull this down as well. and get it more of a of an edit to the tree. Just that center part of the tree, I think. And maybe now we can come in with a brush and just start working on some of these branches of the tree. So that way it doesn't look so much like a, I don't know, like we just threw a radial filter over it, which we did. But we got to kind of hide the obvious look, right? And again, this is just, this is my method that I'm, making up right now. Or that I'm using right now, because for me, photo editing is an adventure. I like to explore things and just see what I can get out of an edit. Doesn't always work out that to the best, but it's still what I like to do. And let's hit O, see what that looks like. Super beautiful mask. That's what it looks like. I hit the number 0 instead of the letter O that time. All right, well, let's see here. What can we do to this sky in the background? Maybe we can really separate the tree from the background. We have a lot of space here to bring out the sky and make it more white. So maybe that's what we'll do. I know that I made the sky darker, but maybe I just went the wrong direction. Maybe we can throw in some whites. Let's expose it. Oh, that's right, because I wanted the moon to pop. So, no, we cannot do that, because then the moon won't pop very well. So, maybe that is where this edit kind of comes to an end. And let's look at a snapshot. Yeah, I think that's cool. Now, I personally don't do this too often, but I think that this photo would actually benefit from some grain. So let's just go ahead and throw some grain in there. So we'll go film grain, and let's go with moderate. Ooh, that's a lot. We'll make it not so much, and maybe not so much on the amount. I think the size can be a little bit larger. I don't know anything about film other than those disposable cameras from way back in the day. So again, this is one of those moments where trial and error is not such a bad thing. All right. But let's go with this 3200. Why not? I don't know any better. If you know anything about all the film ISOs and stuff like that, drop a comment below, because I would greatly appreciate some knowledge on that. But here we are with the final image for this particular photo. Again, the concept that I wanted to go with was make this black and white. And the tree itself is not very interesting. The moon itself is not very interesting, but I think the combination of the two makes it something like, at the bare minimum, I will make someone wonder, why are they looking at this? And that's fine. I like photos that make people ask questions, even if the questions are a little odd, right? But that's perfectly fine. And somehow that, and oh, I gave it a rating. That's what the 0 does. I don't want to give it a rating, but I do like it. So we'll leave that. And I like this one. All right. What else do we have? Let's go to some still life photos. Oh, yeah. That's a throwback from the bread. These are some black and white images that I made a while ago. I don't know if I ever shared them with you all. In fact, this one was made in Silver Effects. These two were made in Silver Effects. And then this one and this one was made right here in ON1. But we won't go over those unless, of course, you guys message and say, hey, I want to see that. And then I will walk you through that. I'll be more than happy to. Let's see here. I want to show you one more thing. I just need to find the photo. There is a maybe it's in my macro photos. Where is that at? Macro work. Yeah, there it is. All right. So not too long ago, I bought some extension tubes for my Canon EOS R6. Well, it's an RF mount. And I thought it would be really cool to make some black and white photos. And, you know, here's a photo of a doorknob. Now, this is not anything over the top exciting, right? But I thought, well, if I made it black and white, I shot it in a black and white camera profile, but for whatever reason, ON1 can't read the R6 profiles. Let me see if it captured the count. Yeah. So I shot this with a 50 millimeter using an extension tube set. And I'm still testing those things out. But as you can see, I had to use 51,200 ISO just to expose this. I think I was using, does it tell me the mode that I was using? No, that's not in there. I want to say that I was using the aperture priority mode because, or I was using manual with auto ISO selection, because the thing about extension tubes is you lose a lot of light, and I wasn't using a flash, so I was just letting the camera make a decision, whatever it thought was a good idea. But I'm also okay with this particular photo having a lot of grain and noise in it. I'm going to hit AI Auto, and then I'm going to come over here to Effects, and I'm going to add, let's see if a black and white looks good on this. And to me, that is a really cool looking image. I don't know what it is about this particular image that I enjoy. And there's Mr. Waffles making a bunch of noise. He hears my family in the background. But, you know, like this is just really exciting. There's a lot of grain and noise in it, but that doesn't really bother me. In fact, I think it adds character to this particular image. So let me know in the comment section, you know, what you think about that. Let's see, titanium looks pretty cool. Like I can make a complete, and maybe that's what I will do. I think I'm going to work on a photo project of photographing macro photography, things around the house that typically you would never even think to photograph, and put them together, you know, and try to tell a story, right? I think that that's something that I'll probably end up doing. And, you know, I can just contrast this a little bit more, and maybe I'll add a little bit of noise reduction. I would honestly leave this alone. The cool thing about black and white film or photography is film that was in black and white used to have a lot of grain. So it's very easy to just get away with that, right? And that is a tip all within itself. If you shoot some really noisy images, make them black and white, and it adds to the aesthetic. Now, I am going to what was I doing? I was going to grab something. I was going to grab noise reduction. That's what it is. All right. So with just the base amount of noise reduction, it cleans it up a little bit, but to me, I don't know, it just doesn't do it, right? So you would have to crank this up pretty good, and now you start to lose like the integrity of the image, the sharpness of the image. And the only way to get that back is to throw in some detail. So just note that it's okay if you have noise in your photo. All right. There are a lot of people who are afraid of having digital noise in their photo because it looks bad. I don't think that this looks bad. I think that this, you know, you can literally play off of the fact that there is noise in the image, right? So I'll leave the noise on, but I'll throw in a grunge filter. Let's go ahead and just brighten this a little bit because I don't want it to be too dark. Throw some detail in there. And this already has a film grain because the grunge filter knows like, hey, it's okay to have a little bit of grain in a grungy type image. And this may not be your cup of tea. Now, because the LUT already took the color out, you're not going to get anything out of that. And then, of course, you can do some other stuff. Let's see, what else can you throw on to this? You can probably throw a bleach bypass on. Now, because there's no color, I mean, you can tint it, and this could be really fun. You know, you get to the color wheel, and I've already shown how you can get custom colors from Adobe Color and throw those in there. So we can maybe make this like a silvery blue. So I'll throw some blue on there, right, for the bleach bypass. Maybe make it a little bit brighter. Bring the amount down just a tad. And then you just, again, this is one of those times where you pull that in to taste, and look at that. That is a very interesting photo, to say the least. And I might even be able to pull back on the color tint just a tad and really make it like a silvery blue metallic image. You just don't get this in other photo editing software. So there is a really cool tip for you. Let's go ahead and save that one because I'll leave that as it is. And the last image I think I'm going to share with you guys today, this is more of an abstract kind of image. Now, this is, what did I shoot this one at? This is at 5.6, but I think I was standing pretty far away, right? I got much closer with the extension tubes here than I was standing on this one. But I was still pretty close to the point that I got a lot of stuff in focus. This is a placemat on our kitchen table. I'm going to hit AI Auto. And that's just going to bring out some of the tones. And in fact, I think I may even bring down the blacks. And Nah, I think I'll leave everything else the way that it is. Maybe add in some structure, because I want this to be a crunchy abstract, if that's even a thing. I wonder if linear. Nah. What about vivid? No. Landscape. Not feeling it. Nah, I'm gonna keep it on standard. All right. This time I'll probably use the black and white filter. This gives me a very flat black and white, and that's fine because I know that I had some blues in here, so I'm gonna pull those around, and I'll probably pull the blues to about here. Then I had some yellows and golds in there. Oh yeah, you can really see what's happening in that. So I'll make those darker as well. What other colors do I have? So it's just blues, and we'll just go with that. Now we'll make the blacks a little bit blacker, the whites a little bit whiter, and we'll play around with the brightness. You can really make like an abstract dark abstract looking thing. No one would really even know what this is. It just looks cool, right? And that's kind of my goal with making photos is, can I just make you stare at something and you know, really look at it and say, all right, what is that? Now, if you know what it is, then it's more of a, do I enjoy what I see in the frame? And we'll throw in a little bit of film grain, right? Let's try some 100 ISO. And we'll make the size a little bit larger. Now this looks like something that is old school looking. Let's see. Yeah, I think that's all that I would do with this one. So this is without it, and this is with the black and white adjustment treatment. So there you guys have it. Moral of the story, when you get into photo editing, have fun with it, all right? What you witnessed in today's live stream is really just me experimenting, playing around, trying out new things, testing the waters to see what works, what doesn't work. And I didn't even go into some of the more odd things. Case in point, let's go back to our last photo. I'll show you something that just might be odd, which will be cool at the same time. Maybe. I don't know. We'll see. I could throw dynamic contrast on there, but what I can do is play around with lens blurs, right? I can play around with lens blurs. And this is where I think a lot of fun can come in. I can go with some of the presets here where it's sides, and all this is a mask. All right, so when I come over here, it's using the tilt shift option or reflected gradient, which is cool because you can do a lot of stuff. I can turn this to the side, and then I can pull this end in and fade it out. So if you maybe have too much in focus and you just want to focus in, maybe I'll say like, oh yeah, the center chord is where I want the focus to originally go, and then everything else can fade out from there. So I can do it like that. And then you can mess around with the way that that filter works. So this is with the filter, this is without the filter, with, without, and then you can even do some more interesting things. Let's see. You could add a border. Now, this, to me, I would probably just leave this border like that. I'm a simple kind of guy with my edits most of the time, but this is a very good border, and you can mess around with the transform to make the border larger or smaller, but that looks like something you could put inside of a portfolio. I think the border filter gets overlooked from time to time, and I think that you can really get away with some cool stuff in the border segment. Right now, I'm in the simple borders, but On1 has all these interesting looking borders. Now, this is where I think it gets a little wonky, right? And that could be good, that could be bad. It just depends on what it is you're trying to do. If you're going like, the fine art route and you want to make something look like it was torn off of a piece of paper, or you just want to add something that adds character to the image, then absolutely go with the borders, right? Now, here's what I would also mention about the borders. I would put a mask on the borders, or at least experiment with it. You don't always have to put a mask on the border, but experiment with it, right? So I'm going to grab a linear left, click right here, and as you can see, it gets rid of the border on the left-hand side, and then I can just rotate this around and, maybe pull back on it. So now the border is gone from the corner, and you can add another image over the top here and blend that in maybe. You can even go into the borders filter again and maybe add in, we'll just add another mask. Come here. I'll click linear left. This time I'm going to rotate it. No, I'm going to rotate it again this direction. And we'll pull it up. So that way the two borders kind of intersect with one another, right? And you can make this way more perfect than what I just did. And you can probably just copy and paste those borders, but let's make this a different border, right? Maybe we'll go back to the simple option. And as you can see, this one is on a black border, and then I can make this one a little bit smaller so it matches up with that particular border. So this one just needs to transform, altered. You can copy, like make note of whatever the transform is. And, something like this, you can make a inverted border, right? Why won't you? There we go. And now I can just pull this through here and maybe do a half and half where it's halfway black and white. Uh-oh. I want you to rotate. There we go. Right? So now we'll just say that that's halfway, right? Now you can do a halfway black and white option on your borders, and you can even pull these in so they're closer to center, and the transition happens at a much faster rate. Boom. That's close enough. And that could be cool, right? The options that you have available to you are nearly endless when it comes to creativity inside of On1. You will have, there are some things that you can do inside of On1 that are more challenging than what you would be able to do in other applications. But nonetheless, I mean, we went from this to this in, a matter of minutes. So, and you can share this with people. Is it the greatest piece of work? Absolutely not. Is it something that is unique, and could it tell a story, and or at least be a conversation piece? I would print this and hang it on my wall, and people would be like, "Oh, there's a piece of abstract art." That's all that they would see it as, right? So do not be afraid to experiment inside of On1. And that's essentially what I was trying to get across. So hopefully that made sense, and the live stream today was helpful to everyone who watched. And if it wasn't, just let me know. Say, hey, that wasn't helpful. But I will ask that you tell me what would be helpful to you. So that way, if it's something I can provide, then I'll go ahead and throw that into another live stream. Now, I will note that there are some really cool things coming in the new release of ON1 Photo Raw. I'm actually pretty excited to see some of the things that are coming out. And I'm not saying that just because I'm an affiliate. I'm saying that because I am excited for the features that they've been releasing. So if you haven't been checking out the ON1 Photo Raw YouTube channel, I recommend that you just go over there and take a look at some of the new features that are coming. There's a perspective tool, or a box. What's the word that I'm looking for? It works with mask, where you can make a rectangle inside of your mask, which is just amazing. It's super helpful because typically you would be able to do that in Photoshop by using the rectangular marquee and making your selections that way. So it's just showing that ON1 is really trying to make as much of your experience of what you would go into a third-party application like Photoshop or Affinity Photo internal, and you can really use ON1 as a dedicated platform. I'm not trying to sell anyone on the software, right? I'm not being paid to say any of this stuff. I'm just a genuine fan of the software at large. So that's why I'm sharing it with you. Now, what I do think, if this works out the way that they're saying that it's going to work, is you'll be able to use ON1 as a standalone program and have plugins that open inside of ON1. And then it saves to the image, similar to how Photoshop works. So I'll be curious to see how they make that work out, because that is one of my biggest things. I don't like to leave ON1. If I can do it in ON1 and it won't frustrate me too much, I'll just stay there because I'm comfortable with the controls. I'm comfortable with the ability that, the end result that I can get. However, if I need to go into silver effects, and if you were on the last live stream where I was trying to go black and white with silver effects and then it just didn't save where I was expecting it to, maybe this will solve that problem. Same thing with analog effects. So I really do look forward to the new releases. Even the fact that you can now export into DNG. I use DNG photos when, for a while, I was having issues with sharing CR3s with some friends, but I would have to export them to a really high file TIFF, which wasn't a big deal. But, if I can share a DNG, it's still a digital negative. And there's software that you can use to calibrate and make camera profiles with a DNG. All right. Now, you're going to need a color checker if you're going to use the X-Rite stuff, and I don't have a color checker, but there's a way of cheating that system, sort of, and that's what I'm excited about with the DNGs. So hopefully, this is exciting to many of you. I see people throwing thumbs up, so hopefully the new release of ON1 is exciting to you. And then they're adding in no noise, which again, I've never tried, but I have seen the videos of people trying it and it seemed like it was working out. There's a ton of stuff coming. There's some stuff that I'm like, I don't know if I would use it. And who knows, maybe I'll just do a full review of all the features that we've seen so far on the ON1 channel. and kind of give my opinion or suggestion on who would get value out of using some of those things. And if it's even a thing that we want. But so far, from what I've seen coming out of the ON1 YouTube channel, this new release is going to be value added to the community at large. And, I'm excited to at least test it out and see if it's beneficial. But I'm going to leave it there. And I will see you all back next Saturday. Next Saturday will be at 6 o'clock in the morning. My family and I are going to a 9/11 memorial service, and that starts at 8. So I'm going to get up early and set my alarm, get up, come do the live stream, hang out with you guys. So I hope to see you there. But until next time, I want you guys to stay inspired and keep creating. Peace.